Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikens from Big Mountain Studio. If you're interested in iOS development, then subscribe, click on that bell icon, and you'll get notified when I come out with new iOS tutorials. In our app, when we edit an activity, we can change the activity's day, but we can't change the order of the activities under one day. In this video, you're going to learn how to reorder the rows in the table view. Now, normally, reordering rows in a table view isn't that bad. If we just had an array of days, it would be pretty easy. But in our case, we have additional arrays inside of an array, meaning we have an array of days like you see here, and each day has its own array of activities. So when we reorder activities, we might want to move an activity from one array to another array. So there's some extra steps that we'll have to take, and here are the steps we'll have to do to make this happen. So say we want to move this row into the previous day, so it falls in between two rows. We'll have to do something similar in the last video where we save the current activity into a variable. Then we will delete that activity from the day where it was. Next, we want to insert the activity into the new day. And finally, we call the update function to update our backend data store. Now notice there's nothing here that mentions we have to refresh or reload the table view. When dragging and reordering rows, we don't have to programmatically update the table view. So that's one thing that makes it easier. Okay, let's head into our project and get this sorted out. But before we do that, let's update the activities on our board. So we already finished editing activities, so we're going to drag that to the done column. In this video, we're going to reorder activities. Now you see there's one last task, which is to edit and delete days. Most likely I'll break those out into their own videos. So we see one activity here, but it'll most likely be broken out into two. Okay, we're in our Xcode project, and the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to tell the table view that you can go into edit mode. Table views have an edit mode that allow you to sort and delete rows. And I'm going to show you what that function looks like here. We need to head into the view controller. And let's scroll down to where all of our table view functions are. It's in an extension down near the bottom here. Yeah, right here. So we'll just add it to the end of this extension. And the name of the function we're looking for is canMoveRowAt. Right here. And for this, you see it returns a Boolean, so we're going to return true. And we're basically saying that we can move all the rows in the table view. Now, as you may suspect, we can use this function to just limit which rows we want to reorder. So maybe you have two sections in your table view, but you only want to reorder all the rows in the second section. Well, you can do that easily. You can just look at the index path that's passed in, and you can say something like this. So then this way, anything that's not in section 1, you can reorder the rows for. But if it's in section 1 or section 0, then it'll return false, and you can't reorder those rows. So this function right here, canMoveRowAt, this allows you to narrow down which rows you can reorder. In our case, we want to reorder all of them. Okay, so let's run the project and see what it looks like. Okay, we'll go into the Bali trip, and look at that. Kind of looks the same, right? Yeah, there was no changes that were made. So this function, it allows you to move rows, but there's a switch or a Boolean that you have to turn on first. And it's a property that's on the table view. So we're going to need some kind of button that the user can click to go into edit mode. So let's take a look at our storyboard here. And what I want a button up in the upper right-hand corner that says edit. Now, in our upper right-hand corner, and let's take a look at our simulator again. Okay, this is where I want it, up in the upper right-hand corner. But you notice up in the upper right-hand corner, that's the navigation bar. And when we look at our storyboard, we don't have a navigation bar on here. If we go to the trips view controller, that's where the navigation controller starts. So you see here, we have a navigation controller here, and there's a nav bar here. And here we can simply just drag and drop a button right on here. But we're missing this item right here, this nav bar item. So if I click on this and I look at the properties here, it says UI navigation item. And that's what we want. So when you have view controllers on different storyboards, you can still add this UI navigation item to your storyboards. And that allows you to customize how you want that nav bar to look once you navigate to that view controller using a navigation controller. So that's what we're going to do. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so I'm going to open up our object library here. Actually, why don't I keep it open because I'm going to need a couple objects. There we go. And to keep it open, I just held down Command Shift Option and then hit L. So remember the name of that object that we want? It was navigation item, not the navigation bar. You want the navigation item. And you can just put that anywhere on here. And it's not going to show in the interface builder, but it'll show in the object hierarchy here. So we have it right here. And then we want a button to go in there. So let's look at our button choices here. And this is the one we want. We don't want the first button. We want the second one, the bar button item. If you read the description, it says represents an item on a UI toolbar or UI navigation item object. And that's what we have, a UI navigation item. So I'm just going to drag this, and you see the little marking, how it goes under the navigation item? Just drop it right there. And you see two groups that show up underneath the title. You have your left bar buttons. Let me open this up here. Your left bar button items and your right bar button items. And as you can imagine, those are for buttons on the left or buttons on the right. Our button we want on the right side. So let's reposition that and put it on the right side. And now this button will show up on the right-hand side. So we want to set some properties on that. I'm going to close my object list for now. And let's take a look at the properties. I don't want it to say item. Instead, I want it to say edit. And if you want, you can further customize this with an image. We're not going to use an image in this case. Also notice I'm not going to set the tint color because watch what happens when we run the project. Notice the edit button already uses the tint color. And the reason why it does that is because earlier we had set a global tint color on the storyboard itself. So if we go into the file inspector and you look at global tint, you'll see this black and white color, but it's set to the correct named color, which is tint. And this is a bug where it shows the black and white. It should show like this. See, this is our tint, our named color, which is correct down here. It does say tint, that's correct, but it just doesn't represent the right color here. So we had set this earlier. So any button that has, or anything that has a tint color on it will use its global tint first. Okay, so I think we're all set. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to create an action outlet for that edit button, because when they click on that edit button, we want the table view to go into edit mode. So let's handle that. I'll go into the assistant editor and let's see, did it open up the right one? Yeah, it did. And where do I want this function? You know where I want it? Right here, right before the extension. So it's at the end of my functions, but it's before the table view functions. So we'll add it right here. And all I'm going to do is just right click on this edit here and drag it, and that'll create an action outlet for me. Toggle edit mode. I'll change the type to UI bar button item. So you may notice that I do that a lot. By default, it doesn't use the specific object for the action, but I like to add the specific object, in this case, the bar button item, because that way, when I'm looking through my functions later, it might be a year, I come back into this project, and seeing the parameter as a UI bar button item, it gives me a better idea as far as what control this action is hooked up to. Okay, so I talked about this property of being able to put the table into edit mode. So what property am I talking about? It's this one right here, is editing. And we'll set that to true. Okay, good. Now that we have that hooked up, let's run it and see how it works. Okay, we go into edit mode, and you notice the table view changed now. So we're in edit mode, and the person can do things with it. But you notice something else. Two things, actually. We can't reorder these table view rows. There's still no way to reorder them. And we can't go back out of edit mode. So once they're in edit mode, they're stuck in edit mode. We need to change that. And you've probably noticed in some apps where you can go into edit mode, and then the edit here changes to like save or done to go out of edit mode. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to change it to done. So when the person's done editing, the table view goes out of edit mode. So let's change that. What we want to do is we want to toggle it. And let's just go into the view controller here, go back up to our function. So just like this function says, we want to toggle the edit mode. What we're basically going to look at is if we're in edit mode, then we're just going to take the opposite value. And in order to take the opposite value, we use this exclamation point, which basically means not. So if this value is true, we're going to get not true, which is false. And if it's false, we're going to get not false, which is true. Okay, now another option that you have is there's a new SwiftUI feature that you can also use. And instead of toggling the Boolean value like this, there's actually a built-in function that you can now call called toggle. And then basically just as it says right there, toggles the Boolean variable's value. So you can use that as well. And the next thing we want to do is we want to change the button's title, right? So let's do that. And we're just going to access the title property. And we're going to look at the title property and see what it's currently set at. And basically, we're going to toggle that as well. So if it says edit, we're going to change it to done. If it says done, we're going to change it to edit. And we're going to use a ternary operator for that. And here's what that looks like. Okay, so with the ternary operator, the first part is the condition. So if the sender title equals edit, then return done, which is the true part. And if it doesn't, then return edit, which is the false part. So you have your condition, the true part, and then the false part. And I'm just going to clean up this extra line here. Okay, we'll go into edit mode, and you notice the text changes to done. Click it again, and we're out of edit mode. Okay, everything's looking great. Now, let's figure out why we can't reorder the rows yet. So let's take a look at that last table view function that we added. Can move row at. And let's take a look at the description here. Okay, and I want you to look at the discussion, specifically that last sentence. It says, by default, the reordering control is shown if the data source implements the table view move row at to method. So that's what we need to implement. We need to implement that move row at function. So let's do that. And here it is right here. Okay, now if you look at this function, it has mainly two things. It tells you the index path of where you came from and the index path of where you're dropping the new row to. And this function will fire after you let go of the row, after you're done moving it. So once you move the row, this function fires, tells you where did you just come from, which is your source index path, and where you just dropped the new row, which is your destination index path. Okay, so what do we have to do here? Well, let's take a look at our steps. And the first step is to save the activity into a variable. So let's do that. Let's take the current activity that we're moving and save it into a variable. And I'll just name out the steps here. Okay, so I'll create a variable, and I'm going to access the trip model, which is what we use for the backing data for the table view. And then I'll just use the source index path to get which day I'm on and what activity. Okay, which day did it come from? And we're just going to look at the source index path, and we want to look at the section. The sections represent the days. And then we need to go into the activity models. And which activity did we drag? Well, we want to look at the source index path again. And this time we're going to look at the row property. The rows represent the activities. Okay, it's giving us some warnings and some errors here. Let's see how we can fix it. What is that? It has an extra space in it? I guess I had an extra space in it. And it's giving us a warning. Oh, it's just saying we're not using it. All right, that's fine. Okay, let's make a little bit more room. This is kind of a long line here. Okay, so what is step 2? Step 2 is we want to delete the activity from the day. So we want to delete the one that we were moving from the old location. And again, all these actions that I'm taking are against the trip model, which is the variable that populates this table view. The last thing I'm going to do is make these updates on the remote data store. Remember, I want to use the source index path because that is where it's coming from. And on the activity models, what I want to do is a remove at. And then this is the index that we're removing. And again, we're just going to use the source index path.row. The rows represent the activities. Okay, so we've removed it from the old location. Now, what's the next step? We want to insert it into the new location, right? So insert activity into the new day. Okay, in this time, when we go into our day models, we want to go into the destination day. So we're going to use the destination index path dot section. This is where the new row was dropped. Then we'll go into activity models, and we're going to insert into that array, and right here. So where's our activity model that we're inserting? Well, we did that in step 1, so that's where we're going to use it here. And then what index are we going to add it to? Like where in that array is it going to exist? Or we're going to use the destination index path for that. And we're going to access the row property, which represents the activities. Okay, there's an error here. I think it's because this is an optional value. Yeah, it's an optional value. So really what we want to do is we want to say we definitely have an activity model here. And I could just explicitly unwrap it on this line. And then number 3 will be fixed. All right, good. So we've removed the activity from the old day and we added it to the new day in the data. Now, what's the last step we want to do? Let's take a look. Last step is update the backend data store. Now, how do we do this? Are we going to need a new function for this? A new activities function for this? No, we're not, because we actually did handle this in the previous videos. So if we look at our model here, our activity functions, we created this function separately here called reorder activity. And this is actually what we're going to use. We're going to pass in which trip we're on, and then we'll pass in the old day and the new day. And then we're going to pass in what's the new location for this activity. We pass in the activity model, so we're going to use that to find out where the old day is. So notice in step number 1, remove the activity from the old location. So using the trip index and the old day index, we find out what the old day is. And once we have the old day, we can use this activity that we pass in, this activity model we pass in, and we can find out where it existed. And once we find out where it existed, we're just going to remove it at that location. And then we also pass in the new day index and the new activity index. So we know what day it's going to and what location in that array of activities it's going to exist in. And that's step number 2. We're going to insert the activity model in the new index. Okay, so the function's already in place. We're just going to call that. I'm going to click on this back button here, and we're going to do step number 4. We're going to call reorder activity. Okay, we need the trip index. That's the first parameter there. And we've used this function a number of times, so we're just going to get the trip index. And the next one is the old day index. Well, again, we could just look at the source index path. The source is the old place where it existed. And we want to look at the section that represents the days. The new day index. We want to look at the destination index path. Okay, the new activity index. Where's it going to? And again, that's the destination index path .row property. And the activity model, well, that's just from step number 1. Okay, so that should work. Let's test it out and see how it goes. Okay, go into edit mode. And notice now, it's kind of hard to see with this background, but there's these little grab bars here that you can grab and move around. So let's try something here. We'll move Island Excursion right up in the middle here. And there we go. We'll click done. And just the test to make sure it changed accurately, let's go out. Let's run it again. And we see that Island Excursion is still in the same place. So let's go into edit mode. And then let's change that location to somewhere else. We click done. And there you go. So now we have another way to edit our itinerary. We can either swipe and change it here. And this will allow us to change the activity type, the title, the subtitle, and the day. But once we change the day, we have no way of changing the location in that day. So I moved LAX down here, but it just adds it to the end. And then from here, you'd probably want to go into edit mode and then adjust where you want it in that day. Then click done. Okay, that's it for this video. If you followed along, good job on learning how to reorder rows in a table view. As you can imagine, reordering rows is a lot simpler when there are no table view sections. But we have sections, so we have to accommodate for that. Well, you now know how to do that. So this is about as difficult as it gets in the workplace. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share it on social media. If you haven't subscribed, you should really subscribe to my channel because I'm going to finish this course and keep coming out with cool videos. If you want to help out the channel, you can provide a translation in your native language. That'll help people who speak your language or people in your country find these videos. All right, thanks guys, and keep climbing that big mountain to be a great developer.